Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name's Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week we are going to be covering the developer Cyan Worlds and their seminal early 90s CD-ROM game series, the Myst series, which includes Myst and Riven, right?
Yeah, Myst, Riven. There's also Myst 3. There's also something called Uru. It's going to get buck wild. Yeah.
Woo.
We're not talking about all that today. It's pretty big. But today we're mostly going to be talking about the first Myst and then how Cyan Worlds, formerly known as Cyan Productions, got started. Essentially, I kind of wanted to do this because I played Call of the Sea, which is a straight up puzzle game, non-violent, like you can't die, just solve puzzles, tell a story situation. And I'm like, let's go talk about one of the beginning games that was like that. And Myst is definitely one of those. So here we go. So it all starts with Rand and Robin Miller. They always loved making game worlds and telling stories about worlds, like really, really world building focused, these two. Okay. And in 1988, they actually did not live near each other. Robin was taking a year off from university and he was writing and trying to establish state residency where he was. And then Rand was a computer programmer for a bank.
Wow, super boring.
Yeah, pretty boring so far. But the brothers actually decided to take their foray into game development when Rand talked to Robin about the idea of making an interactive storybook using this program called HyperCard. Fun story about HyperCard. I actually remember using HyperCard in elementary school to create slide presentations, much in the same way the Miller brothers used it to make an interactive storybook. So if you don't know, HyperCard is based on the concept of a stack of virtual cards. I'm doing some quotes. I realize it's a podcast now. It's a stack of cards. The cards hold the data just like you would in a Rolodex. And each card contains a different set of interactive objects. And like you got text boxes, buttons, but you can make your own and program your own. And you actually click on one element on these cards and it takes you to another card. And you can do this to build a story. And that's exactly what they did. And actually, one reason I wanted to talk about this too is they're called HyperCards. And this technology is one of the things that influenced the hypertext markup language, HTML, which is the language of the modern internet. So
HyperCard, hypertext, I see it.
Yeah.
I see it.
So since I'm learning that in school right now, I was like, oh, this was kind of a fun little thing to focus on for a bit. But did you do HyperCards in school?
Yeah, we had a computer lab. When I was in middle school, we had a computer lab full of Power Macs, older, probably the very first Power Macs. And we did some HyperCard stuff. I don't remember ever really being taught what HyperCard was for or what you were supposed to do with it. I ended up making an animation sort of flip book kind of thing because you could make it so that it would, you could make it advance automatically. It was very mumuch like PowerPoint or Google Slides, but it was a bit more open-ended as to what you could do with it. So yeah, because you could do some logic stuff like branching paths, I think, what you would do if you were doing an interactive storybook. So that was pretty cool. That was a pretty big deal because it was really a reason to get a Mac back in the day. And like you said, it sort of predates the modern internet in a similar idea that you would link between pages, like you would link between cards, HyperCards, you link between text and pages on the internet with hypertext. So it's
exactly.
It's like the grandfather,
It really is. And actually, it's great that you said Google Slides and PowerPoint because we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, essentially, and I didn't really write this in my notes, HyperCards, it was either $50 to buy it new, but if you got a Mac after a certain period of time, it just came on that Mac. So it really was a reason to buy a Macintosh computer in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So let's go back to the story. So the Millers were actually not into video games. They played a lot of D&D, which is a running theme we've had on this podcast. But they also had played a game called Zork, which is an interactive fiction game. That's one of the few video games that really inspired them to do this. So then the next step, like every computer nerd stereotype, Robin went to his parents' basement, like his literal parents' basement,
Classic.
and began drawing pictures and creating a nonlinear story on paper that would eventually become their first game called The Manhole. Before we talk about that, though, I want to mention that the Miller brothers are from and currently reside in Spokane, Washington.
Wow.
I live in Washington. Yeah, Tyler grew up pretty close to Spokane in the Tri-Cities area, so shout out to Washington State, you know? Do you like river parks with waterfalls and microbrews? You'll love Spokane. Is this podcast sponsored by Spokane? No, but it should be, I think. If we're going to take one sponsor, we could take the city of Spokane. So let's real quick talk about the first 3 games that were designed on HyperCards by the Miller brothers under their new studio, Cyan Productions. And those games were The Manhole, Cosmic Osmo, and Spelunks in the Caves of Mr. Pseudo. Some pretty fun names.
Ooh.
So here, I'm just going to do some grime facts to like go quickly through these games, because this is definitely not what we should focus on, but I feel like it's important to understand like how they kind of evolved to make Myst. So The Manhole, developed by Cyan Worlds, it was released in 1924, November 24th, 1988. Ye old video game. It was released on November 24th, 1988. I actually have a bunch of release dates here because it came out on a bunch of different like iterations of CD-ROM for different operating systems. It first came out on PC, or I guess it would be on Mac on November 24th, 1988. If you want to get this like a more recent copy, you can either get it on Steam. It came out on August 18th, 2010 on Steam, or you can get it on goodoldgames.com, January 21st, 2011. Or if you're an iOS person, it was on iOS. Who knows if it's there now, but it came out in 2010
10 years
on
ago.
iOS.
Oof.
Yeah, probably not there anymore, but that's, it actually came out on the Mac operating system, TurboGrafx 16, MS-DOS, FM Towns, which I've never heard of. Do you know what FM Towns is?
Yeah, I feel like I've heard of it. I think it was something that was bigger outside of the US.
Okay, Microsoft Windows and iOS. I didn't really get like a number of copies figure for this. I realized I didn't edit my notes, but I couldn't find sales data for any of these games.
It probably didn't exist for games that old.
Yeah, it really doesn't. The genre is adventure. It's just a straight adventure game. The awards, it did win the Software Publishers Association Excellence in Software Award in 1989 for Best New Use of a Computer.
Oh, wow.
It's an interesting award. Time to complete takes 30 minutes to 2 hours. And Metacritic score, well, there isn't one because this game came out in 1988 and no one wants to go back and review it. But you could if you wanted to. It is on
iOS and it has a 4.8 review rating.
Oh, hey, you know, it's essentially this game, just to break it down and give you a little summary. You are, as the player, you're just playing yourself. You find a manhole in the ground and it reveals a gigantic beanstalk and you go to fantastic worlds via that giant fantastic beanstalk. There are no puzzles to do, only places to explore and story to reveal. It's for kids, all right? It's just a very simple, you're just, like they said before, like world building. You're just walking around this world, you know, just exploring around. The second game is very similar to that same premise. It's called Cosmic Osmo and the Worlds Beyond the Mackerel.
Wow.
Like as in the fish mackerel. It was released on June 21st, 1990. This came out on Mac and Windows on CD-ROM.
Ooh, so it was a big game, big deal.
Yeah. Also, I didn't put it in my notes, but The Manhole also came out on CD-ROM. That's also another reason why there were so many release dates for it on Wikipedia, is it just like CD-ROM re-releases for different operating systems, is my guess. Number of copies sold, once again, no idea. Adventure game. I couldn't find any awards for this one, even though it's pretty like well received by critics according to like Wikipedia pages and stuff, you know, like people enjoyed it. The average time to beat this is only 23 to 58 minutes. So if you want to experience a piece of history, yeah, just go for it. Just an hour. Once again, no Metacritic score, but it was well received by critics. In Cosmic Osmo, you actually are in a spaceship and you fly around to different planets. There are no obstacles, no puzzles. You can't die. The only thing you can find in the game are secrets, but the game does not tell you how many secrets there are because they want you to explore everything and then feel like you're done with it. Like there's nothing to chase. It was like an intentional design decision to be like, oh, if you found the secrets that you found, then you did it. You beat it. Good job. It's your experience.
You're done.
This world.
You can put it away now. Put it back in the jewel case and put it back on your shelf and your kids will play it in 30 years.
Exactly. And be like, what is this game? So that game is just considered quote unquote beat when you've explored everywhere, all the planets to explore. But again, it doesn't take very long, like 23 minutes to an hour. You're good. The last game that Cyan Worlds produced, and that's before Myst, and it actually is very much the precursor to Myst, was called Spelunks and the Caves of Mr. Pseudo. It came out 1991 in black and white, and then it was re-released in 1993 in color. We're going to talk about that more in a little bit. And then it also came out on Steam worldwide August 18th, 2010. It came out on Mac and Windows on CD-ROM, and it's now on Steam, as I said before. No idea how many copies were sold of this game. It's a point-and-click adventure with puzzles, is how I will describe the genre. There were no awards listed. It takes 15 to 25 minutes to beat. It's a very quick. It just
gets shorter and shorter.
Yeah, it really does. And I think it's because I'll say why I think it's so quick to beat. But there's no reviews again. But again, this one got really positively reviewed because this is straight up an educational video game. So this is the game that kind of really told you, if you were like playing this game when it came out in 1991 and someone was like, what's Cyan World's going to do next? Or at that time, Cyan Productions, what are they going to do next? You'd be like, oh, they're going to do this, but on a larger scale, because Spelunks, first person point and click. And it is structured around a collection of rooms, and those rooms are connected by elevators and tunnels, and each room has an interactive mini game in the form of experiments. And these experiments teach you things like you would learn in school. For example, there's chemistry and physics and yada, 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 so cool. All that stuff. So each room kind of has a theme. There's also like a hidden control panel within the game that allows you to rearrange the caves and the rooms around there too. And in 1993, right after they released Myst, Cyan actually re-released Spelunks in color, because we're going to learn later on in Myst, they learned they could make the game in color now. And although the original monochrome version actually had small amounts of cover at very specific locations, this new version was like fully colorized and had scenery and animation. And the coolest part, and the reason I'm reading this fact right now, is there is a Myst Easter egg in the color version of this game where in one of the images you see the Myst Island.
Ooh,
cool. Which is pretty cool. So, as you can probably tell, these three games, and I use that term very loosely because they're not really games except maybe the last one, were just about exploring worlds on your computer. And they were meant for kids. And the only one that actually had any sort of game element to them is Spelunks, since there were little puzzles. But this was about to change with Myst. We did it. Oh,
yeah.
We're here. So let's do the grime facts on Myst real quick. It's only going to take me 18 hours based on how many times this game has been released. So it's developed by Cyan Worlds. There are so many release dates. So I'm going to go down the release dates I could find, and then I'm going to name all the other platforms this came out on. So it came out on Mac OS September 24th, 1993, Windows 3.1, North America 1994, the 3DO came out on March 17th, 1995. The Sega Saturn, it came out in September 1995. The Atari Jaguar was in December 1995. And on PlayStation, it came out on September 30th, 1996. Here are all the other ways you can play Myst right now. The CDI, the Amiga OS, the Pocket PC, the PlayStation Portable, the Nintendo DS, the iOS, Nintendo 3DS, and Android.
Wow.
So there's lots of ways you can play this game. The best way to play it now would just be to get it on Steam, because it's had like 3 re-releases on Steam and they've all changed something. And I think there's even another re-release on its way. There's something called Myst 2020 that's being made by Cyan Worlds. And I think it's just another remake of Myst, but more modern controls. So yeah, there's lots of ways you can play this game. As far as number of copies sold, we don't have any number because there are so many releases on different systems. But what I can tell you, and the reason we are covering Myst, one of the main reasons we're covering Myst, is Myst was the best-selling PC game through the entire 1990s until The Sims beat it in sales in 2002. So for a decade, this was the best-selling game on PC.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was also the top-selling game in the U.S. for 52 months between March 1993 and April 1999. Myst
Dang.
and its competitor, The Seventh Guest, which is a game we probably should also talk about at some point, essentially brought CD-ROMs to the forefront of PC gaming. If we didn't have Myst and we didn't have Seventh Guest, we wouldn't have had the CD-ROM age of PC.
We'd still be playing video games on floppy disks.
Totally. And that's why we're essentially doing this episode. So if you don't know, Myst is a point-and-click adventure with puzzles, and here are the awards, accolades, or groundbreaking achievements that it got. And surprise, it actually only won one award. It only won Best Adventure / Fantasy Role-Playing Game at the 1994 Cody Awards. And then it became runner-up in the Computer Gaming World's 1993 Adventure Game of the Year category, but it lost to Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers, and Day of the Tentacle. That's right, it lost to a tie.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of great games, apparently, at Computer Gaming World's Adventure Game of the Year category. The honorable mention it received at the Electronic Entertainment's 1993 Breakthrough Game category because it lost to its competitors, The Seventh Guest. And average time to complete Myst is 6 hours to 8.5 hours, depending on how completionist you want to be. The Metacritic score, there isn't one. Once again, game came out in 1993, and no one wants to review the original version that came out in 1993. Does anyone have a computer that could play the original version from 1993? I don't know. But again, if you really want to go for it, you could try. The ports, though, of Myst actually got really bad reviews. And I think a lot of this has to do with how they were implemented. I know the 3DS port review was not great. Mostly got criticized because it made you use, like, is it called the C-Stick on the 3DS? I think it's called the C-Stick.
The little, like, nub thing on the right side?
Yeah. I think it made you use that to do something, and it kind of ignored the touch screen, which seems really counterintuitive because if it's a touch screen, you could just touch the object in Myst. Yeah. And that would make way more sense. But hey, it got like a 40 out of 100. So it didn't do very good. But yeah, so the game is good. It's pretty well known as being a great game, but also a very frustrating game, which we'll talk about too later on. So now we are jumping forward to 1990. The brothers have done those 3 children's games, and they finally want to make a game that appeals to adults. And among their goals were believable characters, a non-linear story, and for the player as the protagonist to make like strong choices, like ethical choices that are gonna really they want you to feel something in your gut. Like you got to make a choice. It's gonna make you feel really upset. So the Millers actually pitched a game to Activision under the title The Grey Summons for their adult title that covers all these bases. And Activision was like, hey, maybe you guys should stick to children's games, and kind of blew them off. Yeah, it's kind of messed up. I forgot to mention, I watched a YouTube video, a great YouTube video that I will put in the Discord about the history of Myst. I think it's called like The Complete History of Myst. I'll find it later on and talk about it at the end of the podcast today. But it was amazing, and I highly recommend people watch it. It's like 40 minutes long, but it goes through the whole series, and I watched the whole thing, and it's really good. But it talks about this moment, and I think it even interviews either Robin or Rand, where they're like, yeah, they essentially told us to actually stick to children's games, is what they said, which is pretty messed up.
That's pretty mean.
Yeah, pretty mean. They put a lot of time into this pitch too. That's another thing that came in the video, is they worked on it. They actually did a ton of work to give it to Activision before they said no. So I can only imagine how dejected they felt, after that happened. But at the time of the rejection, they were actually doing pretty poorly, like money-wise. They even quoted as saying they were eating rice and beans and government cheese. That was their entire diet. But they decided, like, you know what? We can keep trying. We can try this. But they were kind of facing the end of what they could do as far as money goes. I mean, the money runs out. It's like, can't really make any more games. And then Sunsoft, a Japanese developer, just came in. The developer came in and was like, hey, we had an idea. What if you guys did an adult-oriented game? Like, this is just one of those random moments of chance where the stars align. And they get rejected by Activision. And then, like, shortly after that, another developer just swoops in and be like, have you guys thought about doing an adult-themed, like, oriented game? And they were like, Yeah,
like
we
a
actually
game
have...
for adults, not a.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. That sounded really bad. I just realized that. Yeah, you can't. Oh, man. Am I going to edit that out? No, we're going to leave it in. It's funny. Okay. So Sunsoft asked them to do an adult-oriented game. And they're like, hey, we have this pitch for this game called The Grey Summons. And so they worked really hard on the pitch. They also wanted to produce a game, they decided, with far more impressive graphics than they previously had done. Because again, they're still using hypercards, but they wanted to kind of spruce those up a little bit.
And those are all fairly cartoony games, hand-drawn, sort of, right?
Yeah, the way it worked, from what I understand, is Rand... Oh, I'm going to mention it later on in this, so hopefully I don't get it confused. But I believe Robin writes and draws, and then Rand makes the hyperstacks, is kind of how it works. Mm-hmm. But they still work together on the overall game design. At least that's what they did for the first 3 games. They bring some people in with Myst, which we're going to talk about soon. But they knew they wanted to make something a little more big budget. So they actually decided to begin development on Myst in 1991 with a new pitch. Okay, so this is them starting to work to pitch to Sunsoft. So they haven't even got it confirmed yet. Okay, they already get a crack team together because they know they're going to need some people to help with this. So they decided to make Cyan Inc. at this point. If you notice too, those older games are still called developed by Cyan Inc. I think they just called themselves that, but this is when they were officially a company, essentially. To help them out, they got Chris Brandkamp, who was a sound designer, Chuck Carter, who was a 3D artist and animator, and then they also had on their team Richard Watson, Bonnie McDowell, Ryan Miller, and they all made up Cyan Incorporated. Myst would be their largest and most time-consuming collaboration to date. This is going to be their huge game, and because of that, they really had to pitch to Sunsoft. And here's the deal with Sunsoft is they were not interested in the PC market at all because they were entirely focused on consoles. And the problem with the PC market for them is the problem with console market for them is that consoles had no hard drives and no memory stuff going on. So they were kind of worried about technical restraints for consoles. So they're maybe we should go to PC. So what they did is the Millers prepared a 7-page game proposal for Sunsoft from their ideas, mostly consisting of the maps and the islands they had made. They knew they needed to split this up for technical reasons because they can't put the whole game into one area. So they actually made different stacks, and they called these stacks ages, which we're going to talk about in the game later. But Cyan went to Sunsoft and said, we need $265,000 to make this game.
Holy moly.
Yeah, which is more than double what they actually thought it would cost to develop the game, but it actually ended up being less than the game's final cost, if you find out. So they actually started high, which is good. I think you should start high because, as we all know, game development, add twice as long as you think, and then add a bunch more money.
Yeah, I feel that's that's the thing is however much money you think it's going to take to make this game, triple it or quadruple it, and then also double or triple the amount of time you think it's going to make to create this game.
Totally, definitely.
And even then, you're going to come in over budget and past your deadlines too.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, this is also in this pitch, by the way, they're already hearing about Seventh Guest. That game I talked about. Yeah, Sunsoft said, will your game be as good as Seventh Guest? Which is going to be that upcoming CD-ROM game that's also an adventure. Seventh Guest, by the way, is a little more horror-focused, from what I could tell. It's kind of spooky, okay? Whereas Myst was not going for that. It was going to be a mystery. Mystery, Mystery. Seventh Guest, haunted house spooky game, but they're both puzzle-based, kind of fiction. Here we go. Okay, so and what ended up happening is, you know what? The brothers were yeah, we can be just as good as the Seventh Guest. They were confident their game would be just as good. And man, they really put their money where their mouth was in the end, I guess. This is actually the cool fact of the podcast right now. We got to the cool fact of the episode. I like to do these. So after they got approval from Sunsoft, as they just did just now, because they were super confident and they had a really good presentation, Cyan actually play tested the game in a tabletop role-playing format. They actually play tested it as if it was a tabletop game before they started designing it.
I feel like there's a lot of games that start out that way, especially games that are heavily like turn-based or math involved, like that aren't necessarily focused on the moment-to-moment action. Is they will do them in like a tabletop form of like, hey, if this happened, would this be fun? You know?
It really, I was actually that's good because I was going to ask. Like, I thought this was really cool that they did this, and this seems like a thing that other studios do.
Yeah. It's definitely a thing that game companies will do, especially in like the early stages of research and development, where they'll be like they don't even have somebody who can program for them. So it's like we just need to find out what's going to be fun and then build from that. And so they can do it lots of times, not every time, but lots of times they can do it without even making a game on a computer.
That's so awesome. I saw this and I thought this was like a cool thing that maybe they were early on doing it, but it's common practice now.
This sounds like the perfect kind of project that you could do that way. Like you could play a game of Myst probably without a computer if you just had like a big old stack of papers and you were like moving through them, you know?
Oh yeah, I just move the cards. Yeah, you could. I mean, you'd need 2,500 pieces of paper, but you could do it.
It would be a tough one, but you could do it.
Yeah, totally. So, all right, now the brothers got funding and they're on their way to make the game. Cyan took inspiration from Zork, that game I mentioned before, that was like an early interactive storytelling game, Star Wars Mythic Universe, and also like books like C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia, and like older literature, especially Jules Verne, because Myst, actually like the whole atmosphere of Myst is very heavily inspired by the book The Mysterious Island, which is by Jules Verne. Yeah, I did not know that.
Mysterious Island. Yeah, okay.
The Mysterious Island. Yes, very good. So, Myst was not only like the largest thing Cyan had attempted at a time, but also it took the longest to develop. The first months of this game were spent just designing the look and the puzzles of the ages. And they kind of made these like whimsical worlds that were kind of for children and turned them into something you could put puzzles and stuff into. Because the way the game works, and we're going to get into this in heavier detail later, is, okay, I guess I'll do a TLDR of the plot. The plot is you're a person, you grab a book, it's called Myst, you get thrown into a world, and then the book, it's a world where people can write into books and create the worlds in the books.
Ooh.
And that is like, and each book is an age, like a different place you can go. So they made these books ages, and the puzzles and the ages were the most important facets of their initial design, and the story came second, which is definitely going to come back to bite them later on. But that's how this game was designed, which I think is kind of smart because that's how you think of like really good Nintendo games. It's always gameplay focused and then story second, which if you're making a video game, the gameplay has to be fun first and foremost. We've played games that are really fun, but with terrible stories. Okay. It's a thing.
Yeah, and that's totally okay. Games that are fun with terrible stories, totally okay. The other way around is a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, it's not that great. So the Millers actually decided that most people did not like puzzles, which I thought was really funny that they came to this conclusion. So what they did is they wanted the good puzzle. Like, to them, a good puzzle was something that was a part of the world. So you didn't even think about it as like a puzzle. Like, you didn't just walk up to a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah,
you know?
that makes
you
sense.
saw a circuit breaker in a house. Like, that's so how do I turn this on? And most of the puzzles they thought of, you could find a common sense or observation to like find the answer, which is hilarious. They did this because I struggled with this game so hard as a kid. We're going to talk about it in a second. But so because Cyan had no like fan base really to please, they actually made the game that they wanted to play, which is something that I think is really important that we kind of lose focus on a lot, especially now in game development. People are like, I want to make a game like this, or like something like this. I want to make a game that's based on this other game so I can get the fans of that other game to play my game. When really it's like, no, you should make a game that you would want to play. I think is very important. I feel like what I just said made no sense, but I think it
No,
does.
I think it makes sense.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. So, in 2016, there was an interview with Rand Miller, and he stated that they wanted to make the design of puzzles in Myst to balance like three different aspects. They wanted the puzzles to be the puzzles themselves, the environment, and the story. And Rand also said that they wanted to make sure that the clues to the solutions in the puzzles were apparent and presented the player in a manner for those connections to be made. Like, once the player finds the solution, and this is exact quote, by the way, quote, once the player finds the solution, if they blame us, then we haven't done a good job. But if they blame themselves, then we have. And I found this hilarious because I wanted to throw my Gateway 1995 computer for my family across the room because of Myst, because I didn't know what to do. I was so mad.
Did you think it was your fault or did you think it was their fault?
I just thought I legitimately thought the game was broken. But then again,
Just
I was
literally
also
impossible.
I was also what? Like in 1993, this game came out. I got the computer in 94, 95. I was 7 or 8. 6, actually, no, I was 6 or 7. Yeah, so it was really
especially
hard.
if this game is meant for like adults. They weren't making it so that a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old could solve this.
Definitely.
Could solve these puzzles.
And I was actually reading about one of the puzzles I got stuck on, and I had like a eureka moment as a 32-year-old man from like, what was it? Like,
oh, that's how it worked.
yeah, it was like, oh, like this would have helped me out like 25 years ago. Thanks. Cool. So it's the boiler room. You got to find the matches to light the boiler before the puzzle works. Okay. So the game was created on Macintosh computers because Macintosh, as we know, runs HyperCard. Very important. They actually mostly designed them on Macintosh Quadras. Fun fact, if you want to get a Macintosh Quadra on eBay, you're looking at $200 to $700 based on the model you get. Very expensive.
They were pretty cool back in the day. There's a wide range of Quadras. You know, it's like buying a Dell Optiplex now. You know, there's like a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, all these from abandoned offices. But hey, maybe you get the Macintosh Quadra that designed Myst. You never know.
Maybe.
Probably not, though. They probably saved those computers and they're in their offices. Yeah. It's like artifacts or something. But once again, they used the HyperCard software. One of the first major like eureka moments that Cyan had was like how much better 3D rendering software was when they started making Myst versus say in 1988. So they found out that they could make the worlds of Myst pretty easily now, and they could make them in color. So
that was like the coolest thing about it was like that it was all these environments were like 3D rendered, right? Like, which was just blowing people's minds left and right.
Oh yeah, it blew my mind as a little kid. Like I played this game because it looked so cool. I had no idea what to do, but it looked so awesome to me. They used so this is actually where I got the part earlier from. Robin was the one focused on rendering out the environment, and there were 2 pieces of software he used for that. He used Stratavision 3D and then Macromedia Macro Model, which is not confusing at all. That's a terrible name for software. Macromedia Macro Model.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Robin would then take those images. Rand would then take Robin's 3D renderings he made and put them into the HyperCard link and link them up and make the puzzles and test the puzzles as well. So that's kind of how they would do it. Myst, as I said before, contains 2,500 frames. So when you're playing a game of Myst, it is 2,500 HyperCards all linked together. There is one card for every area the player can explore. So I think about it like when you walk somewhere and you click the screen, each time you click is one card because it changes your position. So you got to kind of think of it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. What's funny to me is the way they like finished off the images on the cards is they just used Photoshop 1.0.
Ooh.
Which is funny to think of now because Photoshop is so apparent and has so many different versions.
Yeah, Photoshop 1.0 didn't even have like layers and stuff. It was very bare bones back in the day.
Yeah, so I want you to think about it this way. Essentially, they're making a game using the ancestors of a web browser, Blender, and Photoshop. Yeah. Is what they did. That's pretty much how they did it. Whether you want to do like, you could also replace web browser with Google Slides or PowerPoint too. I mean, it's the same thing almost. So
yeah.
In addition, so the game, as we know, has indoor and outdoor environments, and the outdoor environments actually presented quite a challenge for them, especially because they had to design one for each age. And the big question was, how are we going to develop this? So what they did is they used something called grayscale height maps to make the changes in elevation, and then they textured those and they painted them and added details like trees. Overall, they're super detail oriented in this game, which is very important to note because that's to them what makes the quality so high. There's actually a quote here. It says this quote. This is from Rand. A lot can be done with texture, like finding an interesting texture you can map into the tapestry on the wall, spending a little extra time to actually put the bumps on the tapestry, putting screws in things. These are the things you don't necessarily notice, but if they weren't there, would flag to your subconscious that this is fake. End quote.
That makes sense.
So, And like Tyler mentioned before, it is like super detailed. So great game. Okay, but now, so it turns out now a pretty well-known technology actually helped solve a major hurdle in Myst development as well. And we're all going to know what this technology is when I say it, but they had to put video in the game. When you open up the book, and this kind of goes more into the plot, which I'm going to talk about later. And now looking back on this, maybe I should have just mentioned the plot first because I wouldn't have had to keep doing this. But there are books with two brothers trapped in, each one is trapped in a separate book. And as you find pages for these books, you get more and more of their video message. And it is a real video. It's actually Rand and Robin are the brothers because they're the brothers in real life. So if you play the game, you've met the designers. So they had problems trying to like make the video work, and they got it to work and it was fine, but kind of limited. But what saved them is halfway through development, Apple released QuickTime. We all know the video player.
Yeah.
So QuickTime kind of saved Myst development, which I thought was kind of funny because now QuickTime annoys the hell out of me. So I remember when iTunes came out and you had to install QuickTime.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. This is so dumb. Yeah, but I just thought that was really funny. Okay. So the original HyperCard Macintosh version of Myst had an age, had like ages in it. And each age had a HyperCard stack. That's kind of how they divided it out. That's also how they divided it out to make it so your load times weren't as bad, like as you were going through an age. When you skipped ages, your load time was a little longer because you had to switch to a different HyperCard stack. But navigation was a big thing about that. So that's how they shuffled it around and made it so you could quickly go between different HyperTalk scripts and different QuickTime movies and move it along, which I thought was pretty neat. The main like problem they had with Myst, and this I think is a problem for a lot of games in the CD-ROM era, were drive read speeds.
Oh, yeah. CD-ROM drives at the time were like 2x probably speed. And so like 1x is the speed that a CD-ROM has to spin at to be able to read like a music track in real time. So if you're only going twice as fast as that, it's going to take you, 30 minutes to read an entire disc, which is pretty slow.
Yeah. And they had to do a lot of stuff to like move. So they had 66 minutes total of QuickTime animation on the disc, but they had to use like special compression techniques to like make it so that it wouldn't slow down your CD-ROM drive, because their big thing was making it so everyone could run this game on CD-ROM no matter what kind of computer you had, as long as you had a disk drive that was functional. It should work.
It's actually kind of similar to the PlayStation 4. Well, all of the new consoles that have Blu-ray drives, you never run the game straight from the Blu-ray anymore, except the PlayStation 3 you could, but even some of those games like they require installs, right? Because Blu-ray drives are actually so slow that you can't get the data off of them fast enough. And so this is like the original version of that. It's like the CD drives were so slow that they needed to make sure everything on the disc was small enough that it could actually be read off of the disc fast enough to not be as super annoying.
Yeah, they actually say something in this, and you might know more about this. This was from Wikipedia. It said, the Millers tried to allocate files on a physical location of the spiral track on the CD so as to reduce the seek time for images in movies that were closely related, as to reduce the apparent in-game delay as the player transitions from scene to scene. Does that mean they actually put them physically in a different spot on the disc?
Yeah, they try to keep things physically on the disc close to each other that would need to be read close to each other in the same time, because it's so slow to move a laser across the disc that you would notice that if like the first image you're trying to read is on the edge of the disc and the second one is all the way on the inside of the disc, like that's a long time to move the laser between. So if you can position the data on the disc so that those two things are close together, you get a little bit better experience.
That's so funny. Yeah, I just thought that was weird. They had to be like, okay, where's this going to sit on the actual physical disc, and plan that out too. So Cyan also did something kind of interesting when they had playtests of this game. It wasn't just you by yourself playtesting the game, but you actually had another person with you. So you both were sitting next to each other, each playing the game. And they did this because they thought it would be helpful because you could talk to the person next to you. And Robin and Rand are sitting behind you, not saying anything. And they're recording the conversation you have with the person playing the game next to you.
Well, that's a great idea, because then it lets them see like how are people thinking about this.
Yeah, which I thought was really cool. I thought this was really, really neat. So that's just something that I was like a little detail that was on the Wikipedia page, and I'm like, that's a really fun little detail. So they actually did find a big problem in playtesting. They found that there was no inciting incident. So people didn't really know where to start. And in this, like, it's very confusing. I didn't know where to start either when I was playing as a kid. But so what they did to fix this is there was a note they added from Atris, I think is how you pronounce it, to Catherine, that told players the existence of a chamber by the dock. And that chamber had a message in it from Atris that explained what you're trying to do in the game. So they kind of put a little thing in there like, hey, follow this little breadcrumb trail over here, and that'll kind of get you started, which is kind of smart.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, the story with this was secondary to playtesting, to designing, and that showed. They had to do a lot of tweaks later on at the very end of development. And Rand Miller even has a quote saying, "We were place designers, and the maps kind of fueled the story." And because of that, the plot had to move with the environment as it changed. So the actual big ending, spoiler alert to a game that came out in 1993, the climactic ending with Atris was later developed in the game's story after Cyan realized they wanted to create a more complicated ending. And actually, that ending still wasn't enough. Like, in retrospect, Robin Miller felt like they didn't really get that big ethical quandary they wanted at the end of the game. There was no like morality pull and push from the player at all.
That's what they were hoping to do, and
they were really trying to go for it, and even they feel like they whiffed on it. And we'll actually talk more about that when we talk about Riven in the next part of the series. But let's talk about the plot of Myst. So players assume, and this is just straight from Wikipedia, I'm just going to read it out because they can explain it way better than I can. Let's get real. So players assume the role of an unnamed person. I like to pretend it's me, personally. You know, if it's like that.
It's you personally, Mike Coletta.
It's me, Mike Coletta. You're playing as Mike Coletta running around here, which is why you can't solve any of the puzzles. Who stumbles across an unusual book titled Myst. The player reads the book and discovers a detailed description of an island world called Myst. Placing their hand on the last page, the player is whisked away to the world described and is left with no choice but to explore the island. Myst contains a library where 2 additional books can be found, colored red and blue. These books are traps that hold Cirrus and Achenar, the sons of Atris, who once lived on Myst Island with his wife, Catherine. Atris writes special linking books that transport people to the worlds, or, quote, ages, that the books describe. From the panels of their books, Cirrus and Achenar tell the player that Atris is dead. Each player blames the other for the death of their father, as well as the destruction of much of Atris's library. Both plead for help to escape. The books are missing several pages, rendering the son's messages unclear and riddled with static. As the player, you have to find the missing pages and determine which brother you free. That is the morality choice, is which brother you're going to free. This is Mike talking now, not Wikipedia. And the problem with this morality choice is it's not much of a choice. There's like an evil brother and a good brother, and you have to figure out which one it is. So I think that's kind of what they were going for. But gameplay-wise, Myst is a first-person journey through an interactive, clickable, static, mostly static world. So you click to move through the area. Like you just click to move forward. You can click left to look left, right, so on and so forth. You click on objects. You can also use a zip feature, which is like a little lightning bolt cursor appears on the screen. And if you click that, you can move multiple spaces, which is like a good way to fast travel if you're going through some place you've already been, but also kind of bad because you can miss vital clues by doing that. So don't do that all the time if you've never been there. Some items can be carried by the player as well and read, like journal pages, which can give you some more backstory to kind of who to figure out who to choose and all that stuff. Players can only carry a single page at a time. So you want to find these missing pages of the red book and the blue book, and you can only carry one page at a time. And if you pick up a different page, the one that you had before goes back to the spot it spawned in.
Oh, no.
Which is kind of lame if you think about it. But to complete the game, you got to explore the whole island of Myst, and you have to discover like the linking books, and you have to go to all the ages. You have to solve the puzzles. Each of the ages is named Selenitic, Stone Ship, Mechanical, and Channelwood. Those are the 4 ages, and you got to solve the puzzles inside of them and get the pages to complete the books to free the brother you want to free. But apart from this being like non-verbal storytelling most of the time, Myst gameplay is kind of groundbreaking for a couple reasons. There's very little backstory when you start. You're just dropped on this island. There are no enemies. There is no violence. There is no time limit. This is really like, there's no threat of dying. It's just solve the puzzle in your own time. And I know some people find these games very, very relaxing for that reason.
This genre is like really, really popular, I think, among people who don't consider themselves gamers. Probably precisely for that reason of just like, you don't have a time limit. You don't have bad guys you got to worry about. It's just solve the puzzles in your own time. And you're only trying to beat yourself.
Exactly. It's a very interesting game. And I'm really actually excited to kind of continue on talking about Cyan Worlds because as just a whole, and also what they do with the Myst series, because their story is pretty interesting. Like you could obviously go look it up and spoil it, but there's definitely some like high points, some low points. They definitely get very ambitious on certain parts and can't follow through, but there's a little bit of like a redemption story in the end about it. And there's also like a lot of great, just like how much they influenced the modern gaming world. Like I played Call of the Sea and I beat Call of the Sea this week. And that game is a narrative, non-violent adventure puzzle game, and it would not exist if not for Myst. I am convinced. So what I want to know, I guess, in like closing of this whole Myst segment that we did today is, do you like this, listener? Do you want to know more about Myst? If you do, I will continue it in the new year. If you don't, then we'll just pull back on it for a while. So if you can email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com and let me know if you like the episode of Myst, please do. And if you want to know more about it, we can go through it. It's going to be probably like at least a 3-part series in total because there's a lot of games. And I just covered Myst and it was this long. So Riven's a whole nother thing.
You can also jump on the Discord too and tell us if you like it or
Yes, that would be great too. And there's also some fun stuff going on the Discord. Some fun chats, about games. So Tyler, what you been playing?
The biggest thing I've been playing this week, well, 2 things I've been playing this week. We've been playing a lot of World of Warcraft. That's going to be a staple for a little while longer. I think we're getting ready to raid. By the time you hear this, we will have probably attempted our first raid. We'll see how it goes. It's going to be fun, I think, no matter what. But yeah, so we've been playing a lot of that. And then on my own, I've been playing Splinter Cell Blacklist. I'm finally going to finish all of the Splinter Cell games. And so I've done 4 or 5 missions of Splinter Cell Blacklist. And I think it's, gameplay-wise, I think it's the best of the series because it Conviction went a little bit too hard on the, like, killing people, like, action, like if Sam Fisher was John Wick kind of thing. Which is fun, like for what it is. Like if it was fun for what it is, but it didn't feel quite like a Splinter Cell game because there wasn't as much like sneaking and like there really aren't that many opportunities to to finish a mission without killing people. Whereas Blacklist, they go back to that the traditional Splinter Cell stuff where you with non-lethal takedowns and stuff like that. But they keep some of the cool stuff from Conviction, like the mark and execute system, which I know is a little controversial. I think it's really cool because I don't think the Splinter Cell series is about precise aiming. I think it's more about solving the puzzle, and mark and aim is just another tool that lets you solve the puzzle. So yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with that. The missions are really, really long. Like I think the shortest one it took me to complete was like 45 minutes long, which is whew.
Wow.
Yeah, they're really long and a little frustrating because I'll spend a lot of time like scoping out an area and like figuring out where all the guards are and like how I'm going to do this, and then like mess up in my execution of that, and then I'll get sent back to the beginning of that encounter and I'll feel like I lost a lot of time because I spent like 10 minutes like scouting this thing out, and then I realize, oh, I didn't lose that much time. I don't have to do the scouting part because I know what I'm doing now. So it ends up not feeling as bad as it may seem at first sometimes. But that's pretty much it. I don't think I've been playing anything else besides Splinter Cell and WoW. Although I play a little bit more Call of Duty. I'm working through Call of Duty 2 right now. But Splinter Cell is my priority at this point when I'm not playing WoW. What have you been playing, Mike?
Well, I beat Call of the Sea, as I said before. That was very
Nice.
fun. Highly recommend it. If you got Game Pass, play it. It's not out on Game Pass PC yet, but I think it's going to come out on Game Pass PC soon. So, but
Okay.
it's And I actually would recommend playing it on PC because my Xbox is an original Xbox One, and it stuttered a couple times.
It's a struggle.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, my whole Xbox One is on the struggle bus right now. I feel so bad for it. It's done so well for like the past 6 years almost, I think.
You may have a good reason to pick up a Series X when we can do that. When you can just...
Yeah, I just feel like if I want to get a Series X, I got to get a 4K TV, you know? That's...
Yeah, you could get the Series S, and that's much cheaper and doesn't do the 4K stuff, so...
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I could do that. That wouldn't be a bad idea. But, yeah, I think for like see, and then I'm also torn because I really want to play some PlayStation games. Like I really want to play Ghost of Tsushima, and I really want to play like Bloodborne and those kind of games. And I'm like, oh man, I really want to. And of course, Uncharted, God of War, all those I haven't played.
Gotta do
Last
it,
of Us. So I'm torn. But I also, because I remember like I'm a big Battlefield fan, and Tyler you like the multiplayer of Battlefield Bad Company 2.
Oh, I played so much Bad Company 2. That is by far my favorite Battlefield.
So I saw on Game Pass that Battlefield Bad Company 1 and 2 are on there. And I'm like, the multiplayer is probably dead. Like, I just don't think it is.
Probably.
But, you know, I love a good shoot 'em up, quick first-person story, right? I'm going to try these out. So I downloaded both of them because they're not that big. And I started Battlefield Bad Company 1, and I'm going to say this. It's borderline unplayable.
Really? It's got like fun characters though, right? I played a little bit of that.
The characters are fun. I like the story a lot. It's just I've played so many modern first-person shooters now that I know what like a good experience is. And
it feels old.
It just feels old, which is weird because I was like, well, that just means it's an older game, right? But I'm like, no, but Half-Life 1 is an old game, and I played that on PC and it felt fine. So I really think it's just not optimized to the best. Maybe the port is weird. I don't know, or it's just off. But yeah, I was having a real hard time. There's also not really any hit markers, which kind of makes it harder.
Oh yeah, and the first Bad Company never had a PC port either. So like the 360 and PS3 version, that's all that exists.
Yeah, I was trying. I was like, man, it's. I mean, I might get through it. I don't know, but I just kind of picked it up for funsies. But I am planning on playing some Switch games over the break because I'm. Going to be just chilling out, you know, and I want to like kind of work on my Nintendo Switch library because I have a bunch of backlogged Nintendo Switch games that I really want to play. Some of them indies, some of them like, I think I bought Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle for $15 like 8 months ago and never played it. So
I love that game.
I know I bought it on your recommendation and I'm like, I really should play that game. It's so fun. But let's read some emails. You cool with that?
Okay. Yeah.
First email is from Corey. Hey, Mike and Tyler, great episode about endgame content in video games. Hearing you guys talk about WoW made me want to scratch that itch again. I've never been on a raid before, and that is my goal to finally be in one. I'm starting from level 1, so let's see how far I get before burning out. Currently, a level 12 troll druid, in parentheses, for the horde, always. Unrelated note, I was lucky enough to get into the alpha weekend of Back 4 Blood. And let me tell you guys, it's an amazing game so far. If Left 4 Dead and Call of Duty Zombies had a baby, it'd be Back 4 Blood. They have a unique card system, which makes it infinitely replayable. Definitely keep your eye on this one. It made me remember how much I love Left 4 Dead and made me go back and play it. I hope you guys have a great holiday and Happy New Year. Cheers, Corey from New Hampshire. I am so jealous of you, Corey.
Me too. I want to play that so bad.
I am on the Back 4 Blood hype train. I really am.
Me too.
Oh man, that's great. Also, great that you want to scratch that WoW itch again. But yeah, I can't imagine starting from level 1. Wowzers.
Yeah, that could be tough. Like even going from 50 to 60 took a long time, and then once you hit 60, you're not done yet.
Yeah, I think I did because we started playing, and I was like level 1, playing as like a monk, and I got to like probably level 30.
Yeah, this was before the squishing of levels, right?
Yeah, and then I stopped playing for like a while because I was like, well, Shadowlands isn't coming out anytime soon. And then I boosted to 50, but that slog from 50 to 60 was pretty rough.
Yeah, it was basically just playing the whole campaign of the new expansion, which if you like the story and stuff, then you can get a lot out of it. I didn't, so that's on me, I guess, But
yeah, that's great. I'm so excited about Back 4 Blood, though. And thank you for the email, Corey.
Yeah. You want me to read the next email?
Yeah.
We got one here from Hassan. He says, "Hey guys, just listened to your episode on endgame content in MMOs. I was really excited when I saw the subject of this episode because I had spent 4 months playing Final Fantasy XIV from the beginning and had finally made it to the end of Shadowbringers, the latest expansion. I've been having a lot of fun raiding and started wondering why more of the MMO experience isn't like this. Boss fights are easily the most fun parts of an MMO, IMO, in my opinion, but it feels like you have to spend 80% of the time collecting spider butts to get there. Do you think this is all an inherent part of the MMO model, or do you think it's possible to have a game where the majority of the time is spent doing endgame type content? Ideally, I would like to see more of a focus on the latter while preserving time spent on the story. Personally, I think, hot take incoming, that Shadowbringers is the best Final Fantasy story to date, and I wouldn't want anything to diminish that. Just curious to get your takes. Thanks for the fun episode." P.S. Tyler, do you still play FF14? You should get Mike to play too. I'd love to raid with y'all. I can answer the last part first. I don't right now, but I am sure that I will one day get back into it, probably when another expansion pack comes out, because I absolutely love it. And I agree that Shadowbringers is, I don't know if I'd say it's the best Final Fantasy story to date, but it is right up there. It was one of the few MMO storylines I've actually paid attention to and had a good time with.
Plus, you always mention when we're playing WoW something about the Red Wizard class that you wish was in WoW.
Oh, the Red Mage class, the greatest. It's the best MMO class ever, because and it sounds so dumb when you describe it, because it's a ranged class. It's a ranged DPS, but also melee and also healing, which sounds super dumb and like, oh, we're just good at everything, but it's not. It's actually just sucks at everything, but it can do everything, which is why it's so fun. And you can really be the savior of a run because it has the unique ability to be able to resurrect people like really fast, which makes it fun to save a run if you can do that correctly. But as for the question about collecting spider butts to get to the fun part of the MMO, that is something I fully agree with, and I think it's especially egregious in Final Fantasy XIV, because while the storyline is fun and like all that stuff is all well and good, like I don't want to diminish that, it does take several, at least at one point, I think they've toned this down a bit, but it takes several hundred hours to get to the actual fun part of that game. And WoW has that problem too, like we just talked about. Just playing the Shadowlands expansion for WoW, it probably took us 20 or 30 hours to get from 50 to 60.
Oh, easily.
Which is like, and I guess if you're into the story, then that doesn't feel like wasted time. And I don't know if I necessarily feel like it's wasted time, but it definitely feels like tutorial time that we could have got this. We could have jammed this in. I would have much rather had more dungeons than a storyline, I guess. And
the story for me, and this is minor spoilers on Shadowlands plot, I guess, if you care about that kind of thing, is it felt like the story was just trying to push you have a reason to go to these 4 different places.
Yeah.
Like there was no reason to do it. It was like you go there, you're supposed to do a thing, something else is different, and then you do that, and then you go back to Oribos. You know, and it's just like they did that 4 times in a row. And I'm like, guys, like you're killing me right now. Like I would have rather had it have me pick one. And I do it on this, and I commit to it. And this is the world I go to, and I level up for 10 hours, and then I'm ready for raids. And then if I want to explore those other 3 worlds, make a new character. Or that would be way better to me than making my guys slog through the 4 different areas of the afterlife. And then
I agree.
Yeah,
that's kind of how they did it in the last expansion, Battle for Azeroth. If you were Horde, you went to like one zone. I think maybe I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure if you were Horde, you went to one zone. If you were Alliance, you went to another. And if you wanted to play what you didn't play before, you made a new character that was on the other faction, and then you did it that way. And I like that, and it kind of gives you another reason to make another character if you want to see the story on the other side. But yeah,
go ahead. Sorry, I was cutting you off. I got I'm very excited about this topic. So
yeah, me too. That's why I was going to let you go ahead. Say what you were going to say.
Okay, I was just going to say that I think yes, Hassan, you can make it where you don't have to do like all that grinding. I think it should be the money spot. I think it's 10 hours. 10 hours of actual story where you introduce me to this world. I get fully leveled, and then I start doing some raids. And then instead of spending that extra, like however time developing the game to make your 40-hour story content, just do 10 hours of story content and then take those resources and push them towards a second raid or like make more dungeons. In the case of Destiny, it would be every expansion would, if they got rid of story mode say like every expansion is going to have a raid, that would be so much better. Make the raid the story. Oh my gosh.
I agree. And I think Destiny is something that does that right, because the campaign that you play in Destiny, especially, well, so there's the first Red War campaign of like vanilla Destiny 2, which took like, 8 hours to complete? That felt pretty good. You got a nice tight story, and once you were done with that, you were put out into the game that was like, okay, now here's all the different things you can do. And whether or not they get that part right is neither here nor there, but I think they got that balance right. And I don't think Final Fantasy gets it right, and I don't think WoW gets it right. And yeah, because I like we talked about this last week, but like I just want Oops All Raids. Just give me Oops All Raids.
Tyler
just
and I are gonna make Oops All Raids. We're gonna do
dungeons
it. It's gonna
and
happen.
Oops All Raids, and make those early dungeons the way you learn your class. Teach us how mechanics work. What kinds of mechanics are we going to be facing when we do the really hard stuff like the raids? And I think there's some of that. Like those it's not that doesn't exist right now, but like that's how I want to learn my class, is by playing dungeons. And I just don't care about the story. And and I know they put a lot of effort and some people really love the expansive worlds, and they are beautiful. Like all of the different zones they're very unique, and they're very pretty and very cool, but I don't care. Like that's not what I'm here for, And it sucks that like that's the experience that someone gets, and then when they get to end game, the game changes. And for the people that really like that other stuff, that also is kind of terrible for them too, because now suddenly it's just grinding to do the harder content when they really loved doing all the other stuff, which then there's less of that once you finish it. So anyway, I can talk about this forever.
No, me too. I feel like I'm grinding right now to be able to play WoW with my friends. That's what it feels like. And that does not feel good. Like I would rather just play with my friends,
Yeah.
Also,
we've been doing a lot of playing together now too. And it's been a little grindy because we're struggling on some stuff on like the mythic difficulty, which I think is normal. Man. And like, that's kind of part of the experience, is to struggle for a little bit too. So
that spider boss.
The spider boss is tough. So if you don't like the struggle with friends, then maybe it's not as much for you. But I've been having fun. Like even when we play the spider boss over and over and decide, we just can't do it right now. Like I don't necessarily consider that a failure. We learned some stuff. We got to hang out with our buddies, and maybe we're just going to try something that feels a little bit easier.
And we got to watch a friend. Remember, he had a repair mount, which was amazing. I guess my problem was that first, like, when we were playing early on, I mean, it did feel bad until I was able to do dungeons with you guys, and now it feels good. But it really is like, I mean, I just get bummed out when we run a dungeon, and it's like I get gold the whole time. I'm like, can you at least like guarantee one upgrade per dungeon or something?
Yeah. The slot machine is tough when it's just like you just are unlucky and you played a whole bunch and the only thing you got out of it was gold, and maybe like, okay, I got better at the encounter.
Yeah. Also, for Destiny, I agree with you that their timing is right as far as like the amount of time you put in before you're ready for endgame content. The only thing I don't like that Destiny does, and I don't know if you agree with me on here, Tyler, is I don't like, for example, with the Red War campaign and with the Mars campaign, I forget what that was called. Warmind. They... like those Gaul and Zol should have been raid bosses.
Yes, that is what WoW does right. Like the big bad in WoW is going to be a raid boss.
Yeah, like you built this guy up, Gaul, to be the big bad guy of the universe. Like this is the ultimate cabal, the worst soldier you're going to fight. He's so tough. Even the Emperor Callus is afraid of him or whatever. And then I kill him in a 10-minute encounter by myself.
Yeah.
And
then the raid comes out and it's like completely unrelated.
You're like, why do I care? Yeah. Like I would have rather had it be like you fight like Gaul's lieutenant or whatever. And then he's like, I'll see you somewhere or whatever. And then he goes back and then he's the first raid boss. And then Gaul is the final raid boss or something. And Zol also felt so weird because you're like, it's cool. You're throwing these like javelins at Zol and it's awesome. But then you're like, I'm beating this in a like match made fire team with randos, and we're all just doing it to hope we get a special drop, or we're doing it just to farm butts again. And it's like, come on.
You should have made this like 5 times harder and made it the raid.
And make Zol like gigantic, like an actual giant godlike space worm. I've had so many qualms with Destiny over these last months. It's a real emotional relationship. It's a one-sided emotional relationship with me and Destiny right now. Destiny doesn't care, but I care. But anyway, so we got a new rating on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for your email, Hassan. Again, if you want to email us, you can email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. we got to get out of here because we're raiding tonight.
We are, yeah. We're coming up to against the wire here.
But let us know if you like the episode on Cyan Worlds and Myst, or if you want us to go another topic. I know we haven't done there's a lot of big ones on our list still, so we're trying to feel out what we're going to do next. I don't know what's going to happen next week. Surprise episode about the power of the holiday season. I don't know. We'll see what goes on.
We'll see.
But
next week is Christmas weekend too, so
yeah, we might not do an episode next week. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll see. We'll know when you know, listener. Okay.
When we check our podcast feed to see if we put an episode out.
Yeah, we'll let you know. But thank you so much for listening. And Tyler, do you want to say bye to everybody?
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody.